on Daf Nun Aleph Amud Aleph. So we're continuing with Hatmana issues. The Mishnah says, Lo kisal mi BAYT yayim. If you didn't cover the pot on Friday, Lo yichasen mishatech shach, you're not allowed to cover it on Shabbos, even if the type of Hatmana is not Moisif Hevel. Because there's two types of Hatmana. There's Hatmana which keeps the heat the same, so it just preserves the heat, and there's another type that actually generates heat. So even if it's not generating heat, it's just preserving the heat. You're not allowed to cover that pot with that material on Shabbos. You have to do it beforehand. Nowadays, everything that we know, like towels, just preserve heat. So if you wrap around a towel or something around your urn or the cholent pot, it would have to be before Shabbos. Is
there anything today that's mostly hevel?
We don't know of anything that's Moisif Hevel except for like electricity, right? So you can have a combination of Moisif Hevel nowadays. Is like, let's say the pot is on top of the blech, and then you surround it with the towel. Then it would be considered Moisif Hevel.
But you need a separation. You can't put it directly.
No, because you're not allowed to even put Moisif Hevel before Shabbos. So that's why you wouldn't be able to, let's say your urn, you wouldn't be able to do complete Hatmana. Sometimes they have those wraps for your urn. You wouldn't be able to completely wrap your urn.
Before Shabbos? No, you can't do that before Shabbos.
It looks like a sweater. If it goes on top of you,
plugged in, you can't do it.
You have to leave a space, because Hatmana b'miktas is fine.
So that's the lacha.
Kisel v'niskala. If you covered a pot before Shabbos and then it got uncovered on Shabbos, mutter l'chasaisai, you're allowed to recover it. Again, we're talking about the Hatmana that's not Moisif Hevel, that doesn't generate heat. Memale es a kitain. Another halacha the Mishnah says, Memale es a kitain. You can fill up a pot with cold water. B'noisein l'sachas akar oitachas akeses. And you could put that cold, that pot of cold water underneath the pillows to keep it cold. So Hatmana, to keep something cold, that's fine to do on Shabbos. Says the Gemara Rav Yudah or Shmuel, Mutter lahatminas et tzayin. You're allowed to cover tzayin, cold things, to keep it cold, just like the Mishnah said. Rav Yoseph, Tanina. What are you teaching us? We just saw that in the Mishnah. You can fill up your kitain, you can fill up a pot with cold water and put it and cover it with pillows. He's saying something he's saying a lot. If just for the Mishnah I would have said, the Mishnah may be only permitting things that are not usually covered to keep them hot. But something that you usually keep hot, so let's say food, right? So now it happens to be cold food, and you want to keep it cold. Maybe there would be a problem because it could lead me to do Hatmana to keep it hot, like Kamashmalan. So that's why there's a chiddush that even things that you usually use Hatmana for to keep it hot, you can still do Hatmana to keep it cold. Amar Ravuna Amar Rebbe, Asur lahatmin es etzayin. He says the opposite. You're not allowed to do Hatmana for cold, to keep something cold. The Hatanya Rebbe Hiter lahatmin es etzayin. Rebbe said the opposite. So we have a contradiction in Rebbe. One instance is before he heard something from Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yasi, and one is after. What's this referring to? Kihad Yosef Rebbe V'Amar. One time Rebbe was sitting and he's giving shir, and he said, Asur lahatminas etzayin. Now you're not allowed to cover cold things. Omar Lafanav Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yasi, one of his Talmidim, Rabbi Yishmael, said, Abba hitir lahatminas etzayin. And my father, Rabbi Yasi, he did allow a person to cover tzayin to keep it cold. Omar, so then Rebbe said back, Kvar hayr zakein. If that's the case, then the zakein already paskin. Your father, Rabbi Yasi, who's greater than me, he already paskin the halacha, and therefore Rebbe changed his mind. Omer Papa, so the two versions of Rebbe, one is before this story, one is after. Omra Papa, boy rei kam mechabevin zeh zeh. So you see how much Rebbe and Rabbi Yossi, they appreciated each other. She'ilu Rabbi Yossi kayam hayakafuf Yoshe lifnei Rebbe. When Rabbi Yossi was alive, he would sit like second to Rebbe, because Rebbe was the Nasi, so Rabbi Yossi deferred to him. Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi de memali makayim avaysev havam v'kafuf Yoshe lifnei Rebbe. And Rabbi Yishmael, all the more so, he's the son of Rabbi Yossi, so he was certainly, he considered himself lesser to Rebbe. V'kamar, and yet, what does Rebbe say about Rabbi Yossi? Kvar hayrazakin. He defers to Rabbi Yossi. So we see that Rabbi Yossi deferred to Rebbe, Rebbe defers to Rabbi Yossi. Omrle Rav Nachman l'daru avdei. Rav Nachman says to Daru, his servant, atmin litzaynei, cover the cold, something cold to keep it cold. Va'isi li maya da'achim kefela arama. And this was on a weekday, he said, bring me water that a non-Jewish baker heated for me. So it's not considered bishul akum in the case of water. Shama Rebbe Ami v'ikpad. Rebbe Ami heard about this and he disapproved. Amar Rav Yosef my time ikpad. So Rav Yosef said, why was Reb Ami, why did he not approve? Krab v'se'avid. All Rav Nachman was doing was following his own Rebbeim in these two halachas. Chada karav, chada kishmuel. Kishmuel, the issue with the keeping the thing cold, being matmi in the cold, dam Rav Yehuda, dam Rav Shmuel, mutar latmi nesitzayin. Like we saw before, you're allowed to cover the cold on Shabbos. And one of those halachas is karav. Dam Rav Yehuda, dam Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak Rav. Anything that you can eat raw, like water, there's no issue bishul nachri. So that's why he was allowed to tell the goy to heat up the water for him. So why was Rabbi Ami upset? So the reason of Rabbi Ami is, Hu savar adam chashav shiny. Rabbi Ami said those halachas may be true for the general population, but not for an adam chashav like Rav Nachman, because people look to Rav Nachman and they copy him and they may misunderstand. So if they see him getting the water heated with a goy, then they'll end up getting other food cooked by a goy. Tan Rabbanan, Aval Pisha Amru, ein taimnin nafilu b'davar she'eino ma'isiv hevel mishachashecha. Even though the Chachamim said that you're not allowed to do hatmana on before Shabbos itself with something that generates heat. Im ba l'haisif ma'isiv. What?
Not instantly after.
Ein taimnin nafilu b'davar she'eino ma'isiv hevel mish. I'm sorry. Something that doesn't generate heat, you're not allowed to do hatmana on Shabbos. Im ba l'haisif ma'isiv. If you already have a covering, you can add to the covering. But we're talking about something that's not ma'isiv hevel. It doesn't generate heat. Keitzad hu'aisa. How so? Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer noitel es hastinim. You could take the sheets, whatever, like a towel, and maniach es hagluf karin, and you could put the thicker. So you start off on Friday, you have a thin sheet. Stinim are thin. So, but you already have that tamana, and then comes Shabbos, and you want to add more. Maniach es hagluf karin. Those are the thick ones, the thick towels. Oi, or another instance, noitel es hagluf karin. Umaniach es hastinim. You can remove the thick ones and put the thin ones on if let's say it's getting too hot and it's going to burn. He would also say another kula, another leniency when it comes to hatmana. That which we say you're not allowed to do hatmana on Shabbos is only that mecham, that boiler mecham, that pot. Aval pina mi mecham le mecham mutter. But if you pour the contents of one pot to the other pot, then you're allowed to cover the second pot. You're allowed to cover the second pot for the first time. In other words, even if the original pot wasn't covered at all, the second pot you could do hatmana now. Why is that? Hashta kuri kamaker law artuchi kamirtach law. If you're cooling it off by transferring from one pot to the other, then certainly we're not afraid that you're going to turn on the fire. Because that was the whole issue of doing hatmana for the first time in Shabbos. You're going to turn on the fire, or make the fire bigger. Here you show that you don't care about that. Taman v'chisa. If you did hatmana around the pot, and then you cover the pot on the top, b'davar hanital b'Shabbos, something that's not muksa, so both of those things you can move. Oy taman b'davar shein hanital b'Shabbos, or you did hatmana with stuff that's muksa, b'kisa b'davar hanital b'Shabbos, but the cover is not muksa. Harei zinaitil machzir. You could take the pot on Shabbos and put it back, because you could take the cover off, so there's no issues. Talmud v'kisa v'davar shein hanital b'Shabbos. If the stuff around it and the stuff on top of it is all muksam, oy sh'talman b'davar hanital b'Shabbos v'kisa v'davar shein hanital b'Shabbos, or the stuff around it is not muksa, but the stuff on top of it is muksa, then the halacha is as follows: Im haya migula miktsasei. If the cover, the part that was covering, is a little bit uncovered, noitil umachzir. Then you're going to be able to take and put back, because you could do it without actually touching the cover. You could sort of shake it off if it was a little bit exposed on the top. Im lav, but if it wasn't exposed at all on the top, ein noitil umachzir, you wouldn't be able to take and replace because of the muksa issues.
Don't we have a look? You just want the space that the object is occupied. You don't really. Don't we have a look? We can move the muksa for the space.
Right. So that depends on the kind of muksa. So if it's muksa like a stone, then you can't move a stone even if you need the space. If it's muksa like a pencil, then you can move it if you need for the space.
What's the difference?
It's different severities of muksa. So, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, No'iris shel pishtan daka. So this is the what comes out of the process of making linen. Harehi kezevel. So if you use that for hatmana, that's like zevel. That's like dung, excrement, and that generates heat. That material generates heat. Meinichin meicham al gabi meicham. You could put a pot on top of another pot. A meicham is a pot made out of metal. U'keder al gabi kedera, that's also a pot. A kedera is made out of earthenware, though. U'kedera al gabi meicham, u'meicham al gabi kedera, all these different pots on top of the other. V'tach es piha bebateg. And then you can smear the opening, the mouth of the pot with dough. V'loi b'shvil sheyeh chamu. Not so that it should get hot for the first time, ela b'shvil sheyu mishumarim, but for it to preserve the heat. That's fine. For the pot on top of the pot, all these things are okay to keep it hot. U'chashem she'ein taim nesachamin, just like you can't do hatmana on hot. Kach ein taim nesatzayin. This Tana holds that you can't do hatmana on cold. Rebbe hitir latmin nesatzayin. And Rebbe, like we saw before, eventually said that you could do hatmana on cold. Bein merazkin alayas hashelag v'alayas abard v'Shabbos b'shvil she'azayvu meimav. You're not allowed to squeeze or crush snow or ice on Shabbos so the water should come out, because that's nailed. You're creating. It looks like you're creating water from nothing. You could put your ice into a cup of wine or whatever, or into a bowl, even though it melts by itself.
In a glass of water.
What?
A piece of ice in a glass of water.
Yeah. Yeah, or into a bowl and then it melts by itself. That's fine. Next parak. Bamek behema yaita v'ma eina yaita. What does an animal go out with to Rishus Harabim, and what does an animal not go out with? So the general rule is that anything that's like clothing, that for the needs of the animal, then that's not considered carrying. So it has to be, though, necessary for the animal. Yaita gamal be'afsar. A camel can go out with an afsar. That's a rope that they tie into they attach it to his mouth. V'na'aka b'chatam. A na'aka is a female camel. She can go out with a chatam. That's a nose ring of some sort. So these are things that were necessary for their animals. V'luvdikim. That's a chamor from Luv, from Libya. V'prumbia. He goes out with a prumbia. The Gemara will explain what that is. Sus b'sher. A horse is allowed to go out with a sher. That's a type of chain that goes around its neck. and you put a strap around that chain. V'chol ba'alei hasher, and all animals that you use this chain around their neck, yoitzin b'sher, that's fine. V'nimshachim b'sher, and you can also pull the share on Shabbos. U'mazin aleihen v'toivlin b'mkaiman, and if they needed hazah to be sprinkled, or they needed tefillah to go into the mikvah, because there's a tumah issue on the share, you don't have to take the share off of the horse. You just sprinkle the share while it's on the horse, or you toivel the whole thing. You bring the horse into the lake or something, right? Says the Gemara, "My naka b'chatam." What is that? What is a naka and what is a chatam? Rabbi Barbarchana naksa chivarti. He translates naka as a white female camel. So it's very hard to take care of her. She's more wild than the male version. And therefore, bizmama de parzala. So therefore, you need an iron nose ring in order to hold it steady. What? Yeah, exactly.
Is this really all about muksa? Is that what we're talking about here?
No, because there's an issue in the Torah of making your animals do work. So the only thing that really they focus in the Masechta is the carrying issue. And the carrying, basically the principle is that the animal is allowed to carry whatever the animal needs, like clothing or anything for its protection. But anything above and beyond its needs, you're not allowed to put on the animal for it to carry into Rishus Harabim. I mean, if it's in the barn, it doesn't matter. But we're talking about where you're schlepping it outside, and there's no Eruv.
So you mean animals subject to muksa if I put...
Not muksa, carrying.
Carrying.
Yeah.
Not allowed to get an animal to work for you.
Yeah. Okay. Shvis is behema.
Yeah, Shvis is behema. But yeah. Okay. So the next thing we quote from the Mishnah is Luvdakim b'prumbia. So they're allowed to go out with a prumbia, Amar Avhuna. This is referring to Chamra Luva. This is a donkey from Libya.
That's what it says in Mitzrayim.
Okay, Mitzrayim. And Pagei de Parzala, and the object that you're putting on it is something made out of barzel, something made out of iron. I don't know what this is.
An iron bit.
An iron bit. Okay. Levi Shadar Zuzi Lebei Chuzai. Levi sent money to the people of Beit Chuzai, Lemizban Lechamra Luba, so that way he could buy this type of donkey. Saru, the people in Beit Chuzai, they bundled his money. V'shadrulei Sari, and with the money that they bundled, and they're sending him a refund, they included some barley. Lemeimer de Nigri de Chamra Sari. They wanted to hint to him that he should buy a donkey and feed it sa'irim, and feed it barley, because it's good for him. I don't know why they didn't sell him the animal though. What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They didn't.
What does Rashi say?
It was too far. It was half a year of distance.
Okay. So they just send them a refund.
The more barley, the stronger the animal is. So feed them well.
So they're saying, sorry about can't sell you the animal, but we have a nice piece of advice for you. Omer of Yud Omer Shmuel, Machlifim Lifnei Rebbe Shal Zu Bezu Mahu. So they asked Rebbe, what about flipping around the different objects and the animals? So is it specific, like, because the Mishnah talks about specific objects for specific animals. What if you flip it? Naka be'afsar lo tiboilach. For a naka, the female camel, who we said is wild, to go out with an afsar, that's for sure not okay. Afsar that's the rope that goes around its mouth. That's not enough for the for the female camel, so therefore it's carrying no good. So basically it's just a useless object on the animal. You can ask the question, however, Gamal b'chatam. Gamal, using the protection that's for a wild camel, putting it on a regular camel. My cave in the sagile b'afsar. Since a regular camel, you don't need such a fancy protection. It's enough just to put the thing around its neck. Masihu, then it's carrying to put the nose ring in. Extra shmira, extra watch is maybe that's also it's not muscle. It's not carrying. That's the question.
So the issue is whether it's a tafshit or a muscle.
Exactly. When you have a little extra Shmira.
Is it a decoration?
Yeah, or unnecessary, yeah. Tachshid, you mean like the general unnecessary objects on the animal. Omer Lefanov, Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Yossi. So Rabbi said before, Rabbi Shmuel said before Rabbi, Kach Omer Abba, my father, Rabbi Yossi said, Arba behemoths yaitzis ve'afsar. 4 animals are allowed to go out with an afsar. An afsar is the thing around the neck. Hasusa, parrot, gamal, v'achamor. These 4 animals. So you can make the following diuk. You can make the following inference. L'mu'ute mai. What is this coming to exclude? Lav l'mu'ute gamal b'chatam. That a gamal, is a regular camel, is only allowed to go out with an afsar, the thing around its neck, but not with a nose ring. Loi. That's not what you should infer. L'mu'ute naka b'afsar. It's coming to tell you that the wild camel is not allowed to go out with the regular neck thing.
It's almost like he's challenging Rav Yossi.
Well, he's just saying you have no proof, right? Because you can just spin it this way. B'masnisa tana luvdakim v'gamal yaitzim b'afsar. In the Bryce it says that luvdakim and the camel are allowed to go out with an afsar. So what do we see from here? What do we see from here? Is this something? Is this a big revelation? Anyway, yeah, I think we're trying to make a diuk from here that it's only an afsar, even though that diuk is weak, like we just saw from the previous memra. Kitanoi. So the Gemara says this is really a machlekes tanoim, this issue of shmir yasera, of putting something on an animal which is more shmir than it really needs. Ein cha yaitze besugar. It says that a chay is not allowed to go out with a sugar. That's a type of a collar, a rope collar. He says that a chaya could go out with a collar or anything else that protects it. But ma'askinan, what are we talking about in this machlekes? We're talking about a big chaya, a big wild animal like a bear. Misagile sugar, is it enough to put a sugar? A sugar is probably just like
a rope collar.
A rope collar, or just a collar like you put on your dog. So if you're going to put a collar on your bear, that's not going to be enough shmira, because he'll pull you and the collar. Ve'ela b'chai k'tan, we're talking about a little one like
dog.
Like a dog, exactly. Milei sagile sugar. Isn't that enough? So in other words, why would the Tanna Kama say that you can have a collar on your dog? Elalav chatul ikabina. We're talking about a cat. It doesn't even need this collar. It doesn't even need this collar because the cats don't run away apparently. The Tanna Kama savar kevin the sagale b'misna v'alma masayu. The Tanna Kama holds you can get away with an even smaller, even more simple kind of collar. Then therefore it's caring to have the fancy collar. Hanani says even if it's more than you need on your cat, that's not a must. It's not caring. That shmir yasera, a little extra shmir is not a problem. The Gemara says, they were walking, these 2 people. Levi's donkey was walking ahead of Rabba's donkey, even though Levi is not as great as Rabba. So Rabba got insulted, and I guess Levi noticed. Omar, so Levi said, Emele Milsa, let me tell him something. So that way he'll calm down and he won't be upset.
Were they on the donkeys?
Yeah, I know that was my question.
Yeah. Were they on the donkeys or donkeys are...
No, because it doesn't sound like he was in front. It was the donkey was in front of his donkey.
So that's not covered for the other donkey.
It was because it's his property in front of his property. Okay.
And according to the Eretz Scroll, it sounds like he was on the donkey.
Oh, they were on the donkeys?
It looks like it.
But I guess it was just like the heads of one donkey got in front of the... Because otherwise they would say the person got in front of that other person. What?
Well, it says in the Eretz Scroll.
Yeah, he thought he went ahead and they were sitting on it.
Right. Omer Lei, so Levi said, he sort of to make a topic out of it. He says, a wild donkey like the one I'm sitting on, right? He's blaming the donkey. I'm blaming the donkey for getting ahead. Could you use a prumbia on Shabbos, or is that considered extra shmira? So Rabbi said back, the halacha like Chanani, that even if it's extra shmir, so even if your donkey's not so wild, you're allowed to put something on it that's more shmir than it requires.
Yeah, the lemon, he made lemonade.